If you log on to Twitter tomorrow, your feed is probably going to be filled with hashtags about the SSC exams and the other railway recruitment exams and other government exams. Lakhs and lakhs of youth in the country have been, for the last 3 days, tweeting out to government officials demanding that their results for their exams be released. The exams that haven't been conducted for the last 1 or 2 years be conducted this year at least. One of the people who has been instrumental in getting this campaign going is Gaurav Garg from StudyIQ. He tells us about why it's important that these exams be conducted, how privatisation is affecting jobs in the country, and what they really expect the future to be like. Now, over the last, I think 3-4 days, SSC railway exams, the hashtag has been trending continuously. I think there have been million tweets almost every day. And it is starting to get a lot of attention as well, finally. So can you tell me what is it exactly, if you were to explain to a layman, what exactly is happening? Why are so many students, such a large section of people in this country, why are they out on Twitter? What are they asking for? Can you maybe start off from there?
So first of all, thank you for having me here and giving me this opportunity to voice out my views. It's a very important movement. I would call it a movement, and we are putting out approximately 5 million tweets every day on multiple hashtags. The entire issue is that the youth of our country, I'm talking about the poor youth, the youth who are in the tier 3 towns, the rural areas, who don't have much means, they look forward to getting a government job. And there is a lot of craze for the government job, especially in the Hindi belt. And what's been happening for the last few years especially is that the exams are not conducted like they should be. There is no transparency, there is irregularity, there is no discipline. So to give you one example, if there is an exam, the notification gets out, let's say in 2016. And usually these exams have multiple phases. So there is a prelims exam, there is a mains exam, and there is an interview, often. So there is a lot of delay in conducting the prelims exam. The gap between the prelims and mains can increase as much as 2 or 3 years sometimes. And then the interviews are conducted. And even if a student happens to clear all the phases, then the joining is delayed by 2 years, 3 years. Sometimes right in the middle of nowhere, the authorities say that we will not conduct this exam now after the prelims exam. A lot of times it also happens that students spend money on filling up the forms or applying for the exams. There is always a form fee, which may range from as low as 500 to as high as maybe 3,000 rupees. And then the exams are not conducted and neither the money is refunded. So it takes a lot of time, it wastes a lot of time of the youth of India, especially in the prime age when they work hard to become something in life. A student starts preparing at the age of, let's say, 21, 22, and he keeps on preparing for the exams till he or she can by the age of 28 or 29. And his entire youth is wasted in just because an exam is not conducted properly. So the youth ultimately said enough is enough, we have had enough, and we decided to kind of come all together and launch this campaign, hashtag campaign, Speak Up, and Speak Up for SSC Railway students. Initially, the movement was about SSC and Railways exams, and these are the core exams for which almost 4 crore, 40 million youth in India prepare. But then other state exams, they also start, like the grievances also started coming from the state exams. So the Uttar Pradesh students started voicing their opinions that in our state also this is the case. Bihar students chipped in, Jharkhand, now it's become almost a pan-India movement. We are getting few results out of it. Some states have started declaring the results. So for example, just today morning, Haryana SSC results came out, which have been pending for last 1 or 2 years. So this movement is essentially about conducting the examination in a fair way, which gives a level playing field to everyone.
Now, like you mentioned, these exams, their results, and even the way the dates that they're conducted on are delayed by 2 years. I think when I was doing a little bit of research, I found that the exams from March 2019, I think, are still not being conducted. And even though they have registered as early as October or December, they haven't gotten their admit cards. So it isn't a sort of recent phenomenon. It's something that has been happening for a while.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people are drawing comparison with the Twitter campaign for these exams and the JEE and the NEET exams, and they're saying, okay. And maybe I've also seen that on Twitter, I think some people are sort of confused. They sort of think it's the same. And also, I think in some instances, the government has also said because of COVID, there are delays.
Yeah.
But this is obviously, like you just mentioned, it's not something that is happening now. Probably the COVID thing doesn't even really have an influence on why these exams are getting delayed.
Yeah.
So what has changed? Has it always been this way, or till some time ago, was it going according to schedule, and did, in the last couple of years, did something change? Can you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
So there are various layers to your question, and I want to take some time to differentiate those layers. First, let me just tell you the difference between the JEE NEET movement and our movement. It's completely opposite, and it's very puzzling. It's rather bemusing and both amusing. So, for example, the NEET JEE students, they don't want to write the exams, right? But government is forcing them to. And here we are, SSC railway student, we want to write exams and government is not taking exam. So students are puzzled that those students who don't want to write the exams, they are being forced to write the exams. And those who are waiting, they have been waiting for the last few years. That's one. Second question is, you talked about since when it's been happening. It's been happening ever since, it's been happening for the last so many years. The difference is that in the last 5 to 6 years, the people who write these exams, the railways exam, the SSC exam, the IBPS exam, the constable exam, the police exam, and there are a host of other similar examination for the Group B and Group C posts. When I say Group B and Group C post, I mean the non-UPSC post. UPSC are the elite Group A posts, right? If we are to classify them as like that. One thing that has changed is that in the last few years, there has been a huge increase in the number of Group B and C aspirants. And the reason is joblessness. So if there are, let's say, 10 lakh engineers who are passing every year, then they get added up to this force, right? So now a railway exam, typically the people who apply are between 2 to 3 crore. These numbers were not there earlier on. And because of that, the competition for places has increased. The joblessness situation in India, the CMIE survey recently said a lot about it. The government's own agencies, government by its own admission, knows the situation in our country. And this is dangerous on so many levels, because we do brag about we have a favorable demographic dividend, right? We are a young country. Yes, we are a young country, but what do we have to offer to our youth? The youth are finally coming to terms with the fact that the competition is maybe beyond them. There comes a time when almost in every competitive exam, there is some ratio of the people who get selected. Now, this ratio was earlier, let's say, 3%, 4%, in some exams 10%. Now, to give you one example of a railway exam, there were 90,000 posts for which almost 3 crore people applied. So you can imagine there will be a lot of people who would give their 100% and yet they will not get selected. But in fact, students, they think that they are responsible for not getting selected. So they keep on preparing. They spend their entire youth in the preparation. The least that the students demand is at least a fair and transparent examination process. And even that they are not getting. So then that was the tipping point. That was the watershed moment. That students, they started voicing out their grievances. Social media is very robust now. So students can come together. It's not just about the movement on the roads, right? And you build pressure through social media. So we decided Twitter is the platform for this. And so 4 or 5 days back, we have been tweeting since 31st of August. So yeah, it's been 5 days. And tomorrow there is a grand movement on Teachers' Day where we want to have 10 million tweets again voicing out our grievances.
How did StudyIQ come to be part of this, or how did you all decide that it was important for you all to sort of spearhead this movement? And what do you really have for a plan for tomorrow? If you can just elaborate a little bit on that.
So we are the most watched education channel in the world. We get approximately 100 million views a month on our YouTube and app. We have more than 8 million subscribers, almost touching 9 million now. And the students, they started messaging us. We are omnipresent on social media. We are there on all the social media platforms. Students, they messaged us, they emailed us, they voiced out their grievances, they called us, they told us that we are really miserable, and there is the apathy of the authorities was constantly pushing them to the brink. So we also thought that it's ultimately teachers exist because students exist. So it's our moral duty to just guide them, make sure that ultimately we are not doing much. It's a students' movement. We don't want to believe that we are heading this movement or anything like that. It's a students' movement. We are just guiding them. We are telling them the ways and means how to do it in the best possible way, not to get violent, not to make noises for violence. All of these are integral qualities for any movement, because it's very easy for the authorities to dismantle the movement if they find any excuse which goes against the law or against the constitution. So we are just telling them how you can make this movement productive, and that's what we are doing as our moral responsibility.
And not just about the exams or the results, people are also talking about privatization and how this could affect the number of vacancies and how there are just not enough jobs out there. And right now, when we're having this huge crisis and people are losing jobs by the minute, pretty much. Can you tell me how as more and more sectors become privatized, how do you think this is going to affect the youth in the country?
It's very logical to assume that if many of the PSEs or PSUs get privatized, then the private people will not go through the government examination process to recruit. They will have their own merit criteria, like we see in any private company, right? And a private company is not even obligated to have a reservation policy, for example. So the marginalized, the Dalits, they will be the most affected with respect to privatization. At least in a government exam, the government is obligated to give reservation. But in a private exam, if I have a private company, I'm not bound by any law as such. So I think as privatization will happen, and it is happening at a rapid pace, we see a lot of sectors now. There are even talks of private railways, there are private trains. And we see trains like Tejas Express, for example, but it's a first private run train by IRCTC. But now there are train hostesses as we know them. There was no written exam for those train hostesses. They were recruited through private agencies. But had that been a government train, then obviously there would be exam for that. So students fear for the jobs. More and more privatization would mean less and less seats that will be made available through the government recruitment process. I would also like to state another thing here, that it's not just the privatization that is killing the jobs. There are many other things. Now, obviously, there are some things which we cannot control and we should not control, like the advent of artificial intelligence, machine learning. We see chatbots, we see robots, we see a lot of work is being mechanized or automated. So that I don't think we should stop, because that kills innovation. But one thing that might kill jobs is consolidation of the banks. You know that a lot of banks merged recently. Punjab National Bank merged with Oriental Bank of Commerce and United Bank, and Andhra Bank and Corporation Bank and Union Bank merged together, and there have been many consolidation of banks. So to give you one example, last year there were almost 12,000 vacancies in the banking clerical exam, and this year the vacancies have reduced to as low as 1,500. Now that's a decrease of almost 80%. So students are really in a very difficult situation right now, because there is always this anxiety that even though there are exams, whether the result will come or not, at least in earlier days seats were less, is well known, but at least in earlier days there was not this much of irregularity. So to give you one example, there is one opinion that the government deliberately puts out the application process, because the government cannot say that we cannot give you government jobs. That will make them unpopular, right? And we don't have a simultaneous election, so there is always elections in some states. Government simply cannot state that. So one way to kind of assuage the youth is that you put out the applications. So the youth will give them some hope, right? Youth will make them busy in preparation. They will keep on preparing for 3-4 years and just keep on protracting or prolonging the process. So there will be prelims exam, then there will be mains exam after 2 years. Then there will be interview after 2 years. Then they will be joining after 2 years. So this is one way to keep them busy, at the same time assuage them.
You just mentioned privatization is one issue, but a lot of it is AI and everything is getting automated and all that.
Yeah.
What sort of future do you see, or what do you expect should happen so that the future doesn't seem so gloomy for the youth?
So that's a very good question, because we all keep talking about the problems and not the solution. There are some solutions which have been suggested by some very eminent economists, short-term and long-term. Obviously, long-term solution can only be you improve the economy, that will create the jobs. And I don't want to give any other illogical solution, because that will happen slowly, right? We saw a contraction of 24% in the economy recently, and this can only worsen the situation. But there are some short-term measures which can be done. So, for example, one economist has suggested that you triple the allocation for Manrega. I think Manrega has been a huge success, and even by its own admission, BJP has also admitted, although they don't admit it in a very open way, but if they are increasing the allocation in the budget for Manrega, that itself shows that Manrega is successful, right? Even though there are lapses in Manrega, I'm not saying it's 100% perfect, but at least it has given food on the plate of a very, very poor person in the village, who otherwise would have been jobless with no skill. At least Manrega keeps him busy. Manrega gives him 100 days of work. In some states, 120 days of work. So I think allocation for Manrega should be tripled immediately, and people will have money, therefore people will spend it. This may start that supply chain, the demand. This may increase the demand. If a farmer who today has nothing, at least through Manrega, he will have, let's say, 300 rupees a day, which he will then spend on soaps and FMCG products, and it can kick-start the cycle of demand. So this can be done in the short term. In the short term, what we can also do is to have some contractual government jobs. I'm not in favor of helicopter money, that I think we have to maintain a fiscal prudence. So I don't think with our fiscal deficit targets and now fiscal going through the roof, fiscal deficit going through the roof, I don't think we can afford that. We really need to focus on economy. Temple has been made now. All these peripheral things are done. We need to focus on really the economy. And I think that's what we need to do in the middle and long term.
Now, despite the huge campaign that students in this country ran, to postpone NEET and JEE, they didn't eventually get what they wanted. And even though they're continuing to try and see if they can postpone NEET, it doesn't really seem like that is going to happen. Yeah. But do you think that there is some hope for the campaign that you are running, that youth are running for the railway exams and other exams? Do you think there is some hope, or seeing that such a huge campaign on Twitter to postpone NEET and JEE didn't really help? So does that sort of discourage you in any way?
We sent out almost 10 million tweets in the last 4 days, and not one person from the ruling government has even made a comment on it. So what this is doing is this is giving us a kind of a silent victory. The youth, the ideological barriers are being trespassed because of this. So for example, if there was a youth, earlier on he would be like, I would support the government irrespective whatever happens. But now when the fire comes to your door, you start realizing that you have to look beyond the ideological chasm now. So I think in any democracy, any movement is victory. Yes, it may not yield immediate results, but it may definitely yield long-term results. Lot of youth, they want the food on the plate. They are aspirational. And if you kill their aspirations, then the ideology will not matter. And I think so. But yes, it is disappointing that even after 10 million tweets, because what this shows is that there are certain initiatives of the government which were purely for the marketing gimmick. To give you one example, you must have often seen that our railway minister Piyush Goyal, he used to tweet that, somebody sent me a tweet, some lactating mother sent me a tweet, and the help was available immediately in a train, right? So all these gimmicks that my cousin was stranded in Middle East, and one tweet to external affair minister and she was in India, right? And here the students are saying that we have sent out 10 million tweets, and even these are not sizable enough for you to give a reaction. So I think that awakening is happening through this movement. Because earlier, when I used to attack the government for anything and I used to raise questions, my idea of politics, I'm a swing voter. So I'm neither left, I'm neither right. I want food on my plate. So when I used to ask the questions to the government, everybody used to brand me as, the names, anti-national or leftist, or there's people who don't even know the meaning of the word leftist will call you leftist. That when I ask the questions from the government, no youth attacks me. On Twitter, it was an impossible place earlier on, but now I see that the youth are realizing this, that you need to ask questions to the government. If you make certain words, it helps them. It doesn't help you. So I won't call, even if there is no reaction tomorrow also. Tomorrow we'll be doing almost 10 million tweets. And a lot of peripheral media organizations are covering us like yours. So we are really thankful, because apart from NDTV and Ravish Kumar, nobody has raised our voice. If you see the channels who claim that nation is behind them, and they claim all these impressive figures, they have not raised our voice. Only Ravish Kumar did a show 2 days back raising our voice, and some peripheral media organizations, or digital media I would call it. So this is also proving to the students who is with them and who is not with them. It's only in the times of adversity do we know who is with us.
Okay, it was a really lovely interview, Gaurav. Thank you so much for joining us, and all the best.